after George Bush left the White House, he went to work for a gold mining company and named Barrick Gold Mining. Just before he leaves the White House, the rules are changed for gold mining companies so that they can lay claim to gold mining properties in the U.S. in the way that the old prospectors used to. Like find a nugget of gold and you get an acre of land for $5 and just stake a claim. The old claim stakes law. Well, Bush's administration changed it so that corporations could use a special expedited procedure, and Barrick picked up the largest gold mine in the hemisphere, $10 billion worth of ore, paid the U.S. government $10,000. Then Bush gets a job with these guys. Later, what does Bush help them do? He helps them get a gold mine concession in Tanzania, and here's where the story turns a little grim. The gold mining property was already being mined by Tanzanians. No surprise in Tanzania, but that's not such a good deal for Bush and his buddies. So the company that they're trying to buy, which has some rights to dig on this property, runs bulldozers across the property. This is August 1996. Military police are firing weapons, smash down the workers' homes and fill in their mining pits, chase the workers away with guns firing. But in the chaos, there were 50 miners still in the mining pits when they were sealed up, buried alive. Well, it's the U.S. media that I have a problem with. I have a particular problem because I have to swim across the Atlantic to report major stories. From the theft of the U.S. election to Bush's spiking the investigation of the bin Laden family in America to basically the real story of Enron and the sale of America to the corporate donors of both the Democratic and Republican parties. If I want to tell that story, I have to tell it from Europe. My stories run all over the planet, not just Britain from BBC, but this is the flagship news program of the world, Newsnight, and it goes to Europe, it goes to South America, it goes to Asia. I can't get through or over the electronic Berlin Wall in America. And obviously, I'd like to see these stories out. It's not just a matter of me. I mean, of course, I'd like to come back to America to do work, because my kids have these weird upstairs, downstairs English accents. I like them to be Americans. But I just despair of trying to get this material on U.S. television, or even in U.S. newspapers. Yeah, history would have been different. I'm not sure the president would have been different. The fix was in at the Supreme Court, and I figured, there was a lot of fighting back and forth within Al Gore's operation, knowing about the story that I was breaking in Britain, because he hadn't resigned, he hadn't thrown in the towel yet on the election. So I think history would have been different. Whether it would have changed the resident of the White House, I don't know, but it would have been different in this way. People would have known that the election was stolen. It would have been a given fact. They'd have to steal it in broad daylight. They couldn't say, get over it. They couldn't say, move on. They couldn't say, you're being a crybaby. Suddenly, our democracy would be stolen in broad daylight, and I think you'd see people in the streets at that point. At that point, Americans really have a limit to what they're going to take. The one great thing about America is, as my friend Daniel Ellsberg says, you have to lie to the American people. So if you shatter the lie, people would have been in the streets. I have no doubt about it. Certainly, this weekend, while we're filming this, marks the 40th anniversary of the march from Selma to Birmingham led by Martin Luther King. I'm going down to Birmingham to march with Martin Luther King III, with his son. Not just to commemorate it, not to commemorate the great victory of civil rights. I'm going down there because, once again, we're marching for the same thing. Do black people have the right to vote in the United States of America? It's no longer, however, the guys, in the white sheets with the eyes cut out that we have to worry about, and official segregation. What we have to worry about is the Harvard law graduates with laptops who are figuring out how to get the black voters off the voter rolls by the tens of thousands, which they did in Florida, by the hundreds of thousands nationwide. And that's happening right now, and that is why we're marching this weekend, and we're going to be petitioning nationwide. Americans will stand up. When Milosevic tried to fix the election count in Yugoslavia, which is right after Gore threw in the towel, They had the elections in Yugoslavia. The leader of the opposition there didn't say, oh, well, the fixed vote with Milosevic declaring victory shows how strong our Yugoslav democracy is. Instead, he led the people into the streets. And they said, no one's moving, no one's working, general strike until the winner of the race takes control of the presidency. And that was Yugoslavia, when they had to worry that the answer was going to be guns and tanks. And yet we didn't see Al Gore stand up and say, count the damn votes. I mean, let's face it, most of the white votes were counted. And I think that from his perspective, his race and his class won. And so there was nothing more to be said. Just like two frat boys fighting it out, and sometimes one gets to be king of the hill, and sometimes another. But it's the same crew. Their team won. Our team lost. And our team represented democracy. But if they did it openly, I think you would have seen people in the streets. And maybe Ralph Nader would have come out of hiding and gone into the streets of Miami and said, I don't care if they're my votes, but I'm going to stand up for democracy. I mean, one of the problems we've run into is that this new game of computerizing the voting systems. I just spoke to the head of the computer sciences department at Stanford, who's trying to develop a nationwide petition of computer sciences professors say, my God, whatever you do, don't Gatesify the voting system. It'll be the end of democracy as we know it. Of course, it'll be the beginning of democracy as they would like it. They know what they're doing. All these machines, in fact, the little bit of auditing that these machines permit, such as a paper printout, so that you can see what you voted for, that you can verify and then stick in a box separately. You could run it so that the computer, for example, prints out what you believe you voted for. And if you agree with it, you stick it in a box so that there's always a paper ballot backup, a receipt. So if someone challenges the election, they can crack those boxes and match it. That doesn't completely stop theft, because if you monkey with the machines, you can monkey with the printouts. But nevertheless, it would be much harder for them to steal. Not one state that's adopted computer voting has adopted the paper receipt, which is obvious. I mean, you get a receipt when you buy a bag of donuts from a Dunkin' Donuts. And here you're not getting a receipt for voting, for picking the President of the United States. So you have to ask yourself, do they know what they're doing? I think so. Why do the Democrats go along? Because in areas that they control, like Chicago and Illinois, they intend to play the same game as is played in Florida. So the two parties have joined together because the big underlying party is called the party of the incumbencies. And the incumbents are happy to maintain control. This is one way that they do it. You also have very subtle systems, subtle ways to steal the vote that occur when you move to computer voting. We saw that in Florida, which was the first state to move to computerized voting after 2000. In the black precincts in 2002, you had machines that didn't work. You had machines that couldn't be started up. You had machines that couldn't be read. And in black precincts, you had hours and hours of non-voting period. It's a subtle thing. It's not about changing a Democratic vote to a Republican vote. It's about things like creating glitches where the machines are locked up and they can't take or accept or count your vote. And you'll see that happening in black areas. And of course, they have a great excuse. It's always the same thing. Blacks are too dumb to figure out how to work computers. But what you had in Florida was you had helpers helping people and training them to operate the computers in the white districts. The black precincts, people were left to sink or swim. And when they couldn't figure out, they changed the log-on procedures, for example, the last minute in black areas. It's really cute stuff like that. Part of the game of cheating on elections is not so much to change people's votes, but prevent your opponents from voting or getting their votes counted.
Do not fight for a dying regime that is not worth your own life.